So whenever you're ready, you may begin.
This is my hi, good morning. My name is Hayden S. I'll be presenting on why people are switching from conventional pesticides due to health concerns. Here's my argument. Switching from conventional pesticides due to health impact shifting to alternative products and my implications and consequences. Positive impacts: reduce residues on food, so fewer chemicals that are persistent on foods, and lower toxicity and less toxicity caused from naturally derived synthetic properties. And then the negative to that is it's still toxic overall, but can cause health illnesses as a result. And as economic and operational implications, is usually sold at a premium price due to consumer demand being safer. And then reduce chemical inputs. Farmers won't be able to rely on more harmful chemicals. And then negative is higher initial cost and labor intensity. And another negative would be frequent applying, it'd be time consuming and effective issues, and transitional costs for like certification process and actual education and learning on more harmful pesticides. And another thing, effect on pest resistance. So the organic usage and less development of pest-resistant populations, and it can kill a wider range of pests. But there's a negative that the pests that are exposed to the pesticide can still develop a resistance to pesticides. And then there's cultural considerations, reduced health risk, but also a negative experience lag, so another thing such as certification learning and being able to actually utilize the pesticide in the correct way due to the fact they might have been using conventional pesticides longer. Starting my research, I wanted to link congenital deformities from pesticides. However, I changed my research to why people could switch due to health consciousness from conventional pesticides to organic alternatives. I found in my research that a majority felt that awareness is key to preventing illnesses, like long-term illnesses. But I've also come to the conclusion that pesticides are varying in degree of effectiveness and health consciousness. They both work differently on their own and are beneficial in their own ways, as well as not benefiting downsides as well. These are terms. Conventional is different substance compared to organic alternatives. As it is said on the board, it is derived from synthetic properties. The majority of the time, properties is derived from generally more harsh compared to organic pesticides. Whereas organic alternatives are derived from pre-existing material that is derived from natural properties. However, the use of properties is a human prerogative, meaning the utilization is only able to take effect only by human intervention or interaction. These are conventional versus organic, the key differences. When compared to one, there are key differences between the two groups. Conventional pesticides are usually approved by regulatory bodies such as the EPA. It can ensure evaluation for toxicity and their environmental impact according to policy regulations that aim to improve more positive impacts, as well as encouraging the public trust to reassure consumers that products or services are safe to pursue. But there are also drawbacks such as limited availability and to such effective chemicals that are more than regulated by the EPA or larger industry like farms. When compared to organic alternatives, they are derived from natural resources, like I said before, so more than likely they are less crude compared to conventional. The majority of conventional products contain neonicotinoids, according to Cody Craddock, an agent of employee of NC Extension. He explains that an agent can be used to help assist the regulation of pests and fungus, in which the impact could be a long-lasting health effect and exposed to humans. This action will inevitably lead to possible birth defects, endangering the lives of future generations. One of the major reasons for switching from conventional pesticides to more organic solutions is the environmental impact. The conventional product are more harmful to organisms in the soil around. Contrasted or compared to organic products, they will break down easier, in which they benefit humans. And pollinators, which pollinators also help the pollination process that supports the natural development of growth of organic foods such as vegetables and fruits, which are major contributors to the general diet of humans. However, there are drawbacks to organic solutions that many may not realize. The use of metal-based fungicides can accumulate metal in the soil, causing more toxicity issues that play a heavy hand in long-term health issues. There's also major issues, according to the EPA, that are well-known links that cause long-term chronic conditions also even illnesses that can put people in dire conditions that are life-threatening. Major advantages to more eco-friendly solutions are the production of negative exposure, meaning there could be an increase in less health-related issues that are of chronic illnesses, things that were listed and described by the EPA, and also the NC extension, are linked to neurological disorders usually caused from neonicotinoids, with the addition of hormone disruption, which can possibly lead to congenital deformities. By switching to organic solutions, consumers and farmers are less likely to develop issues, but rather benefit from solutions. However, according to nonprofit organizations, organic pesticides are not always safe. Organic solutions can still have harmful compounds that are naturally sourced, like neonicotinoids, said as the extension, derived from nicotine, which is when it's concentrated, it can be deadly when exposed to. Another issue or drawback is that organic solutions, compared to conventional solutions, are less effective. That means they lack better capabilities when compared to conventional pesticides. The key difference is that organic solutions leave a smaller yield in more larger industries such as croppings. Here's my research question. How are health impacts caused by conventional pesticides change the consumer's decision to seek out more organic solutions? Here's my methods used. The reason I chose qualitative and quantitative data collection was because of their benefits. Qualitative data allowed me to understand where each participant comes from and how they actually feel about the topic they were interviewed on. It was definite that it would be easier to be able to identify human behavior and the impacts it had on consumers' behavioral decisions. This is a major key point for my research because it showed me a deeper and more clear understanding of the research I gathered through interviews. Not just being able to tell why to actually analyze their decisions based on behavior, but to see the emotional standpoint as well. Quantitative data allowed for an easier capture of data, easier to identify pinpoints, key points, and participant responses, and measured awareness of each participant's capacities. Now, open-ended questions. The open-ended questions that were used during the interviewing process allowed for the participants to express their feelings and how they felt about each question. Not only how they felt, but what they thought logically about each question, weighing cons and pros. To be able to get solid information from each participant helped me gain meaningful insight for each participant. It also helped me gain better information that closed-ended questions wouldn't give me. It can help me in how each participant's experience they've had or someone they've known been exposed to pesticides. Open-ended questions. These are the questions that were used on my interview. So, affected by pesticides, how they felt about pesticides, the importance of how they thought of organic alternatives, ever heard, and the awareness that I measured, ever heard of organic alternatives, and the availability, the cost, and accessibility, which was a major key point within my interview. These are closed-ended questions. So my closed-ended questions on tier 1, 4, and 5 in my interview process allow me to get more meaningful information for a collection of definite answers. Number 1, I delved into someone, a loved one who has been affected by pesticides, which brings the question of how detrimental pesticides are to someone, which helps support my argument in the research how their behavior could impact their decision from switching from conventional pesticides to alternatives. My second question, number 4, this question was used to scale the importance of alternative environmentally friendly products, which led me to discover people's true insight that a majority of people of the participants felt that environmentally friendly products were more beneficial based on their own opinion rather than conventional pesticides. A key vocal point and one of the questions allowed me to gauge the awareness of participants, allowing me to see where my participants' general perspectives were aligned with and how they felt overall at the topic at hand. My personal findings that I found while doing my research: the study recognizes a gap between knowledge and behavior among consumers, while the majority of individuals acknowledge the risk of pesticides. Most still consume conventional pesticides based on price, convenience, and availability. Overcoming these barriers will need encouraging a shift towards more sustainable and health-conscious agricultural methods. This study fills in the gap for critical research by focusing on health-related concerns as a driver of consumer behavior, a perspective that is overshadowed usually by ethical concerns. The study emphasizes the key role of awareness and behavioral influences to choices that are associated with health concerns, that are associated with conventional pesticides. The study utilizes on concentrating on the demographic of Generation Z. The study also delves deeper into the demographics majority and current trends, promoting any insightful research that can inspire others, as well as actually inform the companies manufacturing these products and change practices to make them more sustainable. is my conclusion. As I concluded, I saw that chemical transparency was another common theme emerging from the survey responses. Some participants expressed distrust of pesticide companies, citing the lack of clear labeling and suspicions that companies deliberately conceal information about harmful ingredients. Some participants felt that the lack of transparency makes it difficult for consumers to make their own decisions about their level of pesticide exposure. This mistrust of conventional pesticides is safe. They will most likely readily opt out for what are they consider to be less toxic and more humane alternatives. Despite these misconceptions, however, most participants did not rule out conventional pesticides entirely, illustrating the tension between risk perception and day-to-day issues. Another imperative issue is the gap between environmental awareness and the real-world concerns. If asked about the importance of using environmentally friendly products, some participants rated it as highly important. However, if to respond to the availability of organic alternatives, the majority of them indicated that organic products were not available and too expensive. This means that if people recognize the value of sustainable alternatives, economical and even logistical constraints prevent them from embracing organic solutions as much as possible. And some participants are harder to prepare, more expensive, and less successful. Conventional pesticides which further renders them less attractive to the average consumer.
All right. So if you will listen as Mr. Hodgen asks you your first question.
So how did your initial exploration of the scholarly conversation lead to your final research question or your project?
So my initial start off, I wanted to go more look for congenital conditions from pesticide exposure. But as I worked on, I couldn't really find as much information as I really hoped for. I had contacted hospitals and universities, but I really couldn't find any information because it hadn't been covered as much. So I had to delve deeper into more general research into why people would switch from conventional to more organic products. So then I looked farther in to see why they would. So I looked for accessibility, cost, availability, and the regulations used by the EPA to then go further into that part of it, and then which furthered my research and my personal findings to see that most people are fixated on the accessibility cost, and that's what honestly pushed my research.
Thank you.
How do your findings provide directions for future research in the field?
For future research in the field, my findings find that regulations and policies are a big factor that play into the role of people actually wanting to purchase it or being able to purchase it, which falls into the availability category. But also, what also pushes it for future research is the key point that people usually fixate on the cost and accessibility, which renders it more hard to actually pursue or to utilize in their actual fields, and to be able to realize that sometimes organic products can be good, but the overall fact is they're not always as good because they do have downsides that don't always benefit them as much as more as conventional pesticides. So which overall, my future research shows that conventional products will still probably be used in the near future rather than organic products.
Thank you.
How did you handle the uncertainty of the research process?
Uncertainty of the research process, so I handled that there really wasn't an uncertainty, but my research process was just what I found is what it is. So what I found is that sometimes it wouldn't make as much sense, but you have to make it make sense. So instead of just saying the cost, accessibility, and availability is not very high in people, I'd utilize that in my research to make it an actual point that people can't utilize or access it as much as conventional products.
All right. Thank you very much.